Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep into the world of online speech today, and specifically, the changes happening over at Meta, the company behind Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Something a lot of our listeners are really interested in, so we thought we'd take a closer look.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically, they've rolled out these pretty significant changes to their hate speech policies.
Right.
And well, let's just say even people who live and breathe tech are kind of scratching their heads.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher for sure. To help us sort through it all, we've got an expert on social media policy joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Now, to jump right in, the biggest change, the one that's causing all the buzz, is that Meta will now allow users to accuse LGBTQ individuals of mental illness. And this is solely based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. No mincing words there. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, pretty massive.
And to really drive it home, here's what they're saying. Directly from Meta's revised guidelines. We do allow allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation, given political and religious discourse about transgenderism and homosexuality, and common non-serious usage of words like weird. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because on the one hand, it seems like they're acknowledging that there's this harmful rhetoric out there.
Yes.
But then they're kind of saying, but it's fine, go ahead and use it. It's creating this really tricky loophole that it could have some serious consequences. And I think what's important to remember here is that this isn't just about words.
Yeah.
It's about potentially legitimizing discrimination, putting a target on the backs of individuals who are already vulnerable.
Exactly. It's like they're opening the door to all these harmful stereotypes and giving them a platform.
Yeah, exactly.
And this isn't even the only change, right? It's like part of a much wider shift in Meta's approach to content moderation in general. Zuckerberg, Meta's CEO, even called it a cultural tipping point towards prioritizing speech. They're stepping back from fact-checking, and they're moving towards a more community-driven system.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely a complex issue. Think about it. Imagine a post that falsely claims vaccines cause autism.
Yeah.
With this new community-based system, will there be enough informed users out there to flag it, to actually do something about it?
Right.
Or is misinformation just going to spread like wildfire?
That's a scary thought.
We've seen this happen on other platforms, bias, manipulation, even outright harassment.
Oh, absolutely.
It can spiral out of control really quickly if things aren't managed carefully.
You bring up a really interesting point about other platforms, because this is something that GLA, a leading LGBTQ advocacy group, is calling Meta out on. They released a statement saying, and this is a direct quote, "Without these necessary hate speech and other policies, Meta is giving the green light for people to target LGBTQ people, women, immigrants, and other marginalized groups with violence, vitriol, and dehumanizing narratives." But, some might say that community moderation puts the power in the hands of the people. How do we balance those viewpoints?
Well, I think what GLAD is highlighting is this potential for real-world harm.
Right.
Think about it. Imagine being an LGBTQ teen and seeing these accusations online, reading these things about yourself. It could have a devastating impact on their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes you think, who's really most at risk when platforms start to loosen these safeguards, And how much responsibility does a company like Meta really have for the content that appears on its platforms?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Where does freedom of speech begin and end?
Exactly. And who gets to decide?
Yeah. It's all very complicated. And what's even more interesting is the timing of all these changes. Meta recently donated $1 million to Donald Trump's second inaugural fund. And they also appointed UFC President Dana White, who's a known Trump supporter, to their board.
Interesting.
It makes you wonder, are these things connected?
Well, it's certainly prompting a lot of questions. It does make you think, is this a sign of Meta aligning itself more closely with certain political ideologies?
Right.
And if so, what does that mean for user trust, for platform neutrality?
Well, it's a big one.
It's a slippery slope, right? When tech giants with this much power and influence start to get cozy with political figures, I think transparency is absolutely key here. Users deserve to know how these relationships might be shaping the online landscape.
That's a really good point. Transparency is so important. Well, this deep dive has been it's been pretty eye-opening. We've gone from Meta's controversial policy shifts to their potential ripple effects. Like we talked about, less protection for vulnerable groups, the risks of unchecked misinformation, and this, this sort of looming question of political influence, it makes you wonder, are we just seeing the tip of the iceberg?
Right.
Are we heading towards this buyer beware internet where users are just left to fend for themselves in a sea of unfiltered content?
It's a very real possibility.
I mean, what does it all mean for the future of online speech?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. It's something we all need to think about as we navigate this ever-evolving digital world.
Absolutely.